remember in my last video, as we were taking off, I mentioned a fair bit of smoke towards Walwa after a fire had started the previous night. Emergency response was pretty rapid. They had firefighters on the ground pretty quick and also a lot of aircraft. So with all that in mind, it's been very difficult to be able to even think about flying here. Visibility at the moment at the airport's roughly 4,000 metres and has been for a number of days. And flying for me basically, you know, doesn't meet any of my minimums, and legally I can't because I'm a VFR pilot only. But secondly as well, when I was flying out to Mount Beauty that day, air traffic control were doing an awesome job. They don't need another VFR pilot in the airspace anyway. So visibility aside, I'm not flying at the moment. So what I decided to do today was a video that's probably, well actually not probably, going to answer the two most common questions that I get on the channel. So what are those questions? Well, number one probably won't surprise you, and that's all about cost. Everyone wants to know, how much did Kilo Charlie Bravo cost me? And today I'm going to give you the total cost, everything that went into the build, all the extras that I added, so you've got full transparency. So what's the second most asked question? Well, the second one again is all about cost. And that is all about, have I seen the estimated running cost that I thought was going to be in Kilo Charlie Bravo? Has it actually turned out that way? These are all pretty relevant questions because the majority of the people that are watching this channel come from either an experimental background or maybe a background that wants to see them come into the experimental class. So I don't think it sort of comes as any surprise that those are the two things that get asked the most on the channel. And today I just want to give you an unbiased opinion on whether or not I thought the costs were what I thought they were going to be and whether or not this thing's worth it. So I don't want to jerk around and keep the suspense level on this. I want to give you the price straight away. So as you see, Kilo Charlie Bravo right now, how much did I actually pay for this plane? I've got my notepad out, and you know that that's always dangerous. So the total cost, inclusive of GST for me, was $550,066. For those that are in the US, because I know there's a fair percentage of my viewers from there as well, that equates to $331,166 exclusive of tax in your US currency. Before we kick off into all the little extras that I added onto my plane, I wanted to also mention to you that the quote that I started with was very different to the quote that I finished with. Now for me, that's actually a really, really good thing, and let me explain why. Until I started to build the plane, I actually didn't really know what I wanted and where I wanted it. I knew that I wanted an IFR capable plane, that was really clear. But some of the little extras that we ended up putting into the plane and the changes that we made to it throughout the build assist, for me, is completely invaluable and has ultimately made me enjoy the plane even more than what I possibly thought I could. And the enjoyment isn't around smile on the face type stuff, but it's about the day-to-day operation of the plane. Just making things a little bit smarter in my workflow and the ability to be able to grab things or use things when I need them. So the way I want to do this is I want to take you through the cabin, and I want to show you the things that you get stock standard and the things that are additional extras if you choose to do them. You will get one G3X screen with every single kit supplied. The switches and the layout can be all customized to your liking. You'll notice here that my backup battery is flicked on. That's what's running the G3X right now. That is an additional extra. And the reason for putting that one in was I wanted the ability to be able to plan on the ground without having to put the master on. The rest of the switches and their flow were all designed in a specific session with Errol where we designed the panel from top to toe. Once again, you'd expect to see the majority of these switches in any stock standard Sling build. A couple of the switches, however, have a little bit more meaning in my particular build. Namely, the EFIS switches, and then also the addition of a wigwag light and the pitot heat. I'll get into the specifics of these extras once we get to that part to explain it a little bit better. The flaps are motorised, and that's a real joy for me because I used to have manual flaps, and very easy to control. Once again, that comes standard in a Sling TSi. This little unit's your G5 and it's your backup flight display unit. So if your normal flight displays lose power for whatever reason, you've always got this in your back pocket. And my understanding is that it's got well over an hour's worth of power, so plenty of time to get yourself back on the ground. Once again, believe it or not, this is a stock standard package, so you don't have to pay extra. This is where the magic starts to begin. So what you're looking at here is my navigator, the GNX 375. The GNX 375 is an all-in-one IFR GPS navigator plus ADSB in and out transponder, giving you precise WAS GPS navigation plus traffic and weather capability. I can tell you now, this is the best bang for buck navigator that you're going to get. You do lose the ability to be able to do VOR and ILS approaches in comparison to the GTN series. This of course was an additional extra and is the backbone of my IFR certification for the plane. So now onto the radio stack. Radio number 1 is a GTR 205, and again that's a stock standard radio that comes with every Sling kit. I wanted redundancy in the system, so I put a second radio in, a Garmin GTR 20R, which is a remote radio operated through the G3X. Finally, below the radio I installed a GMA 245, a physical panel. This was just a preference. I'm still a dial man. I still think that in turbulence, dials are easier to work than touchscreens. Last but not least is the Garmin 2-axis autopilot. It controls the aircraft's roll and pitch for you, holding heading, track and altitude, and cuts workload, smooths out every phase of flight. And believe it or not, it's stock standard. Next option I chose was the external alternator. Being IFR certified with the navigator system and 2 G3X panels, plus a regulated pitot heat, there's the potential for a large power draw from these units. I didn't want to get myself into a negative state and drawing on the battery, and right now I'm flying with this thing on every single flight. Moving on to the next added option. This wasn't initially on the first plans that I drew up. Instead, we were going to make provisions to wire the second G3X and provide a hollowed out glove box. It was in my third stint of the build assist that I finally decided to pull the plug on the second G3X. There are a couple of reasons for this. I strongly believe from a resale perspective this will protect its value. But secondly, now flying with 2 G3X touchscreens, I can tell you I wouldn't have it any other way. For my IFR certification, in Australia you need a compliant magnetic heading, either a direct reading compass or a remote system, plus a standby direct reading compass, which is why I chose the Analogue compass. In terms of power ports, I went with 2 options, the Garmin GSB 15 and a generic that we bought from a marine store. For those people thinking about building or are building and thinking about their power source, I can highly recommend the GSB 15. The charging speeds are around about 50 to 60% better than my generic option. So stepping out of the cockpit now and looking at the airframe itself. When I first started looking at the price list, one of the things that I thought I could skimp out on was filling all the centre holes of the rivets. Let me tell you, after filling rivet holes myself, this is money well spent, and I believe if you're doing a build assist, you're absolutely silly if you don't do this. So the paint, when we talk about the build assist, comes with a stock standard 1 coat of white. So any additional colour on top of the white becomes extra cost, and that's something that you need to be mindful of. Obviously, the more advanced the artwork, the more difficult the paint job is, the more your paint cost is going to creep up. For me, again, this is where the build assist really came to its own. Errol was able to just persuade me from a couple of little mistakes that I was going to make with the paintwork, and we've ended up with the scheme that we've got now. And it really probably didn't deviate too much from the existing design that I had in my mind, because the philosophy was based off the Mercedes-Benz F1 team, or the Petronas green being the highlight. What I like about my paintwork is it's definitely something that you see at the airport, but it's not really in your face and leery. And in the end, I didn't use any of the designers at all. It was all designed by myself. And the painter that Errol used was absolutely awesome. Came out with heaps of options, sense checked the paint for me as well too, to make sure I was happy with the colours. There was a lot of back and forward. And that, my friends, is why you pay the professionals to be able to do a job like that. Right at the start of the build, one of the decisions that I had to make very early in the piece was to try and decide what sort of prop I was going to get. And at the stage that I was looking at, the Duke props were basically non-existent in the Australian marketplace. It ended up being that there was another build assist, which was a high wing, which was slightly ahead of mine, that ended up with the first Duke prop on it. And that was Peter's. G'day Peter. So I guess both of us took a little bit of a gamble on this Duke prop pairing along with the Rotax 916. But I have to tell you, I am so happy with this prop. And it's true, I haven't flown in a lot of TSIs, and the other TSIs that I've flown in have been with a 915. But I have to tell you, the climb performance in this thing is, I think, mind-blowing. The Duke prop for me, I considered a standard inclusion in the kit, but you could argue that it is an additional extra. Regardless, each kit will come with a prop. You can choose which one. So in this video, I'm trying to be as impartial as I possibly can. But the question is, would I put a Duke prop on my next build if I decided to do another one? Yes. I couldn't complete this video without mentioning, obviously, the Rotax 916, which is the power plant of my airframe. I consider myself pretty lucky that I was able to secure the 916, as it was in that changeover period between the 915 and 916. The performance numbers at cruise don't seem all that different. Takeoff, a little bit different. The 916 is definitely a lot towier off the ground. But the big difference is the TBO time. So from the 915 being 1200 hours, the 916 is 2000. You need a power plant, so this one is a standard inclusion. I wanted to add a little table at the end just to show all the options all on one page, so you can pause and have a bit of a look if you're interested in seeing that. I've included it in US dollars and Australian dollars. Importantly, from an Australian perspective, you will get a quote in US dollars. So we are at the mercy of the greenback, unfortunately, compared to the Aussie dollar. All figures have been worked out at $1.51 Australian to $1 US dollar. The best way for me to show you this table was to show you the things that I personally added that I didn't need to add to the build, but I chose to myself. The other part here is still considered to be options in the quote. However, I would say to you, really, it's a cost of doing business. The only part you could ultimately take out of this one is the build assist and go factory direct. But remember, you are sacrificing your ability to be able to do your own maintenance on your own plane. Or alternatively, you could build the whole thing yourself. Hats off to you. And sorry, obviously, if you were doing a VFR only plane, you could definitely take away that IFR certification as it's not needed. So with total cost now completely covered, it's time to answer the other question, which is the ongoing costs of the Sling TSi. And to be specific, how close was I to my initial figures compared to what I'm actually seeing on the aircraft itself? So if I go back to my initial list, what I thought versus what it actually is, I was basically within about 10 to 13% off in terms of what I was thinking for the numbers. The headline numbers that I found have stood out for me in terms of making it a little bit more costly than what I expected, included the Garmin database currency and keeping that up to date. And also you'll see my incidentals have increased as well. And that's for things like landing fees and annual landing fees, all the above. So I think that one of the things that's surprised me probably more than what I was expecting was the efficiency in the Sling TSi. Back in my first video, I was kind of expecting that it was going to be about 30 litres per hour. But the reality is that I'm getting far better than that with that Rotax 916 and Duke prop pairing. Now, I'm not running it super hard, and I know that there's a number of Sling owners in Australia that run theirs a little bit harder than what mine is, but I'm typically cruising probably at around about 68 to 70% of power. I'm not up around those 80s, 82%. There's a bit of a trade-off there in terms of economy and speed. And if I'm being honest, I'm not well enough educated to be able to say that this particular profile gives you the best result in terms of economy. What I do know though is that basically, since I started flying this thing around the Riverina, I'm getting roughly about 25 litres per hour, which I think is absolutely exceptional. So in terms of the numbers, I was pretty close. I'm not going to go into fixed versus variable pricing because I think my audience knows enough about that I don't need to explain it. If you do need that explanation, go back to the original video and I'll explain what fixed and variable costs are. One of the things that whenever you're budgeting for a plane, you need to consider is the cost of your overhauls. And I have included the numbers with those in it, and you'll notice they've gone up as well. And the reality is that maybe in 15 to 20 years time, when I decide to upgrade or change these things over, it's going to be a whole different kettle of fish in terms of pricing anyway. So honestly, I use the pricing without reserves. So a couple of other things if you're doing a build assist that you need to be aware of. So if you're building your own plane, you want to be able to maintain your own plane. To enable you to be able to do that, firstly, you have to have built 51% of the plane. That's what the build assist program does at the very minimum. Secondly, you need to go to the SAAA, become a member, and also do their maintenance procedures course. That's going to enable you to do your own maintenance on your aircraft, and it is going to save you a heap of coin, even if it's VH registered. For me at the moment, I'm doing a lot of assisted maintenance. I want to get the professionals to just do it with me for the first few occasions to make sure I've got somebody looking over my shoulder, and then eventually I'll start to take a lot of that stuff on myself. But I got to tell you, that is one of the massive benefits of doing a build assist. And in terms of the cost itself of doing the build assist, and I would argue that you'll be able to recoup your costs within about 5 or 6 years if you're actually doing the majority of the maintenance yourself. And this for me is one of the main reasons why you would do a build assist as well. So yes, you get the experience of the build assist, which I say to you is A+, but then also secondly, the ability to be able to do your own maintenance or at least assist in your maintenance process is going to save you money year on year. So as we start to wrap up things today, I wanted to just cover one more question that comes up a little bit. And that question was, if I had my time over, would I do it again? And the answer is 1,000 times over, yes. There is nothing more amazing than what I've been able to do here with this Sling TSi. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a lounge room watching YouTube channels about Sling TSi builds, dreaming one day that I could potentially make something like that myself. Fast forward to now, I'm living the dream. There's been a lot of sacrifice from the family to enable me to do what I've done. I've met some incredible new friends and also know my plane back to front. And I hope that this video has in some way helped you understand the experimental class and also the mighty Sling TSi. Until next time.